This is Pinnacle Lutheran Church Sunday Bible Study. The following session was recorded on Sunday, March 3rd, 2013. Revelation chapter 9.
Okay, good morning to you all. We're going to jump into Revelation 9 for this week, and I believe that we can get through. There we go. Right on time. I believe we will be able to get through the entirety of chapter 9 today. So what we're going to do is let's just start. We'll read in with Revelation chapter 9, and just so I was listening to a couple of the podcasts, just so that when we're listening to it, we've got an idea of what's actually being read. I'm going to read it, and then I may have you all come back and read through it again, but just so that we get an idea of where we're at. Revelation chapter 9. And the fifth angel blew his trumpet, and I saw a star fallen from heaven to earth. And he was given the key to the shaft of the bottomless pit. He opened the shaft of the bottomless pit, and from the shaft rose smoke like the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened with the smoke from the shaft. Then from the smoke came locusts on the earth, and they were given power like the power of scorpions of the earth. They were told not to harm the grass or the earth or any green plant or any tree, but only those people who did not have the seal of God on their foreheads. They were allowed to torment them for 5 months, but did not kill them, and their torment was like the torment of a scorpion when it stings someone. And in those days people will seek death and will not find it. They will long to die, but death will flee from them. In appearance, the locusts were like horses prepared for battle. On their heads were what looked like crowns of gold. Their faces were like human faces, their hair like women's hair, and their teeth like lions' teeth. They had breastplates like breastplates of iron, and the noise of their wings was like the noise of many chariots with horses rushing into battle. They have tails and stings like scorpions, and their power to hurt people for 5 months is in their tails. They have as king over them the angel of the bottomless pit. His name in Hebrew is Abaddon, and in Greek he is called Apollyon. The first woe has passed. Behold, 2 woes are still to come. Then the sixth angel blew his trumpet. And I heard a voice from the 4 horns of the golden altar before God, saying to the sixth angel who had the trumpet, Release the 4 angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates. So the 4 angels who had been prepared for the hour, the day, the month, and the year were released to kill 1/3 of mankind. The number of mounted troops was twice 10,000 times 10,000. I heard their number, and this is how I saw the horses in my vision and those who rode them. They wore breastplates the color of fire, and of sapphire, and of sulfur, and the heads of the horses were like lions' heads, and fire and smoke and sulfur came out of their mouths. By these 3 plagues 1/3 of mankind was killed, by the fire and smoke and sulfur coming out of their mouths. For the power of the horses is in their mouths and their tails, for their tails are like the serpents with heads. Their tails are like serpents with heads, and by means of them they wound. The rest of mankind who were not killed by these plagues did not repent of their works of their hands, nor give up worshipping demons and idols of gold and silver and bronze and stone and wood, which cannot see or hear or walk. Nor did they repent of their murders or their sorceries or their sexual immorality or their thefts. We're into the woes. I'm sorry?
Oh, woe is me because of all these plagues, is that it?
Well, no, there's a difference, because we've already, in chapter 8, we've talked about these. We've talked about plagues.
Okay.
Now we're into something that's even more... These are different. Woes. These are entirely different things. What's happening in chapter 9 is going to be, and as we started to see in our reading for today, these aren't just minor pestilences. This isn't just going to be a small darkening or the 3rd angel with a blazing torch and 1/3 of the rivers and springs. It's not going to be these things anymore. Chapter 9 is in line with chapter 16, is in line with chapter 21. this is the beginning of the end?
Well, it sounds like, as I was looking back, it sounds like what's going on right now under the trumpets. It said a great star blazing like a torch fell from the sky on a third of the rivers. Well, not a third of the rivers, but didn't we just have something in Russia? Didn't something fall from the sky in Russia and kill several people? And then there was another thing here too. But it doesn't matter. Anyway,
Well,
interesting. So, we're killing the earth.
well, we've been doing that for a long time.
That's what I mean, yeah.
Um,
We're going to pay for it now.
It said it wasn't going to, well, that was the first one.
yeah, that was
Yeah.
there was actually, and it was the third trumpet that was blowing. Third angel in chapter 8, verse 10.
Yeah.
The third angel blew his trumpet, and a great star fell from heaven, blazing like a torch, and it fell on a third of the rivers and a third of the springs of water. The name of the star is Wormwood. A third of the waters became wormwood, and many people died from the water because it had been made bitter. Okay, but what's different is that's more of a pestilence or a plague. That's just explaining what's going to be happening on the temporal plane. The language changes entirely once we get to chapter 9, because what ends up happening is, look at the creatures that are explained. Have we ever seen any of these sorts of things? Have we ever seen a shaft coming up and going out of the bottomless pit? Where is the bottomless pit?
Hell.
What's that?
Hell.
But we've never seen it.
No.
We've seen rivers. We've seen things falling from the sky. We're moving out of the realm of the plagues, where these are. John uses human things to show us these things, what these things will look like, and we're entering now into the woes. In other words, into the spiritual realm. Okay, who is the star that has fallen from heaven to earth? You don't need to answer it now, but what's your hunch?
Yeah.
Who is the star? It does rhyme with Schmevel, or Snaten, or Gucifer, I guess. Look at what his job is. He was given... I'm sorry?
See that you talk about the devil?
Yeah. And whoever, for right now, let's just say whoever this is was given the key to the shaft of the bottomless pit.
That has to be the devil line, right?
And the fact that later on he is referred to as the angel of the bottomless pit.
Okay, right, and then you go back to it and you look at it in verse 11. They have a king over them, the angel of the bottomless pit. His name in Hebrew is Abaddon, and in Greek he is called Apollon. Okay?
Which means destroyer.
Exactly.
No footnote in my Bible. Interesting.
All right, so we know, if nothing more, we know that this person, this star who has fallen from heaven, is the destroyer. Okay, so he's probably come to do good, right?
No.
I'm sorry. We're living in such a postmodern world that I got to joke about these things every once in a while.
Absolutely.
I want to see if y'all are still listening. All right, so the fifth angel blew his trumpet. A star falls from heaven to earth. He's given the key to the shaft into and out of the abyss of the bottomless pit. We have entered into the supernatural realm. What we need to know as we go into chapter 9, and then, like we had said before, chapter 9, chapter 16, and chapter 21 all depict the same events. Each more cataclysmic as you get closer to the end. Okay? 21 is going to in the end of 21, we know what the victory is going to be. In chapter 9, we have a foreshadowing of what the victory is going to be. In chapter 16 is really where it gets really messy, because it's going to appear as if things are not going to be okay. Okay, but we also get that sort of an impression here in chapter 9, and we'll get to that here in just a second when we start talking about the locusts. Okay, all right. Any questions before we actually get really into 9? Because there were a lot of things that were written or read.
It looks like there's going to be a lot of temporal suffering, too. Oh, you're talking about before 9 or this thing we just read here?
In 9.
In 9.
Yep.
It said out of the smoke locusts came down, they were told not to burn the grass or plant, but only those people, they were not given power to kill them, but only to torture them for 5 months. Yikes.
What proceeds from the shaft first?
The smoke?
The smoke comes out. And what ends up happening is that the smoke comes out and the sun and the air were darkened. Now, it's very easy. This text may, on the first reading lend itself to think, okay, well, there's a big hole in the ground somewhere in Texas probably, because that's where holes to and from the abyss would probably be. Just saying. And from that hole, comes all sorts of smoke and all sorts of other things. And this isn't a literal understanding. We cannot literally understand what's going on. What's going on here? Because what is happening here is it's saying there's going to be a smoke that's going to come. And think about it like this. Think back to your fire training as children. Okay, you don't stand up in a burning building in a smoke-filled room, not just because you can't breathe, but because you can't what? You can't see. You can't make out, up, down, left, right, heads or tails in anything. And that's what's basically being said here. The guy with the key to the abyss, he's coming. And the first thing that's going to come is smoke. And it's going to be such a confusing smoke where you're not going to know what's happening. This is spiritual. And he's saying this is going to be basically spiritual darkness. That's the beginning. And with the smoke, and then from the smoke came locusts on all the earth. What are the qualities of locusts in the Scriptures? Think about the plagues.
What do you mean by the quality?
Well, what do they do? Are they nice?
Overwhelming destruction as they wade through.
Yeah. They come in swarms. They leave nothing behind them untouched. They are totally destructive. They're not even good pets.
What's a locust? It isn't.
A locust is like a grasshopper, except they're bigger.
And yet they have the power here to do all that stuff. Well,
These are not literal locusts.
I know, but figuratively.
The locusts, and we're going to start to get into a better understanding of who these locusts are, okay? And I'm not going to reveal to you who these things are until we get to the actual qualities, which we'll see in verses 7 and 8, okay?
Yeah, why not lions or bears? That would be...
They actually have qualities of lions. But I hear what you're saying. We would say, oh my, to that, right? It's a bad pastor joke. Are there any good pastor jokes, by the way? That's typically not funny as a rule. All right. So from the smoke came locusts on the earth, and they were given the power. Somebody gave them power. Who?
Probably Satan.
You're not going to like the answer to this. God gave them the power.
How come?
What's the power? What is the power that they have? To kill?
Well, no. But to torture? Does God torture us?
Harm anyone without the seal.
Where does it say that?
I don't remember exactly.
It says they were not given power to kill them, but only to torture them for 5 months. Verse 5.
Not to kill them, but to torment. And the torment was like a scorpion, and when it stings someone. And in those days they will seek death and will not find it. They will long to die, but death will flee from them.
Right.
Ugh.
Didn't it say somewhere here only people without the seal?
Yeah, it does. Verse 4. Okay. They were given power. We know they were given power by God. Okay. God allows these things.
Okay.
Because they were given the key to the shaft.
What's that?
Because they were given the key to the shaft, and that's
Who was given the key to the shaft?
The fallen star, Satan.
Okay, but he had unleashed it.
By somebody who has to be God.
What's that?
He's given the key by somebody.
But it works the same way. Okay, look, think about it like this. Okay, y'all have your Bibles? Okay, I actually don't have mine. That's funny. Look at Job, the book of Job. Most specifically, chapter 1. verses 6 through 12, and then some of you can look at Job chapter 2, verses 1 through 6. Job. Or as they say in South Dakota, Job.
Job what?
Job 1, 6 through 12, and Job 2, 1 through 6. So the book of Job. Job 1, 6 through 12. If somebody has that, if they could read that.
You want me to read the Job's first test?
Job 6, I don't have...
Okay, verse 6. One day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. The Lord said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" Satan answered the Lord, "From roaming through the earth and going back and forth in it." Then the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil." "Does Job fear God for nothing?" Satan replied. "Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You have blessed the work of his hands, so that his flocks and herds are spread throughout the land. But stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face." The Lord said to Satan, "Very well then, everything he has is in your hands, but on the man himself do not lay a finger." Then Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. So God, okay. That's interesting. Why does he let Satan do that? Why doesn't he say, "Behind me, you devil"?
Because what Satan wills to do, what the locusts, which we'll talk about here in a second, what the locusts will to do, guess what would happen if they just had their will?
Who?
The locusts and the man who has the key to the shaft.
Oh, they'd just kill everybody.
They would have denied. What? Who is he? He is the destroyer.
Mm-hmm.
So, and here's the thing: it doesn't come just as like ultimate destruction, just in terms of what the aftermath would look like in terms of charred earth and those sorts of things like that. No, the way this destroyer works is from the inside out in such a destructive way as to leave nothing inside, and as to not even leave the shell that was there on the outside of this. This is utter annihilation. Had Satan had his will, had the man with the key to the shaft, had the locusts had their will, it wouldn't have been torment. I mean, torment is a strong word. But it wouldn't have been torment. It would have been agony. It would have been weeping and gnashing of teeth. It would have been death and destruction. And not only that, but ultimately separation from God. Why is God allowing these things to happen? First off, we have to answer that question, we need to know, who is it that these ones are being sent to?
Well, that's what it said. The ones who don't have the mark of God on them.
Okay, the mark of God of the seal. And we had mentioned, we had talked about the seal. What was there? And again, we're revisiting the seal. What's the seal?
I must have missed it.
Forgiveness, the mark of baptism, the continually being fed with the word of God and the means of grace and the words.
There's no outward seal. It's the...
I mean, if you were to stand me next to David, and let's pretend David was a heathen. Actually, I'll use just pseudonym. Frank. Frank was a heathen. You wouldn't be able to tell the difference between us. There's no outward seal on me and nothing on him. But what's interesting is that even in terms of outward seals, the locusts are going to be having outward seals. Different kinds of seals, which are going to lead people astray. We'll talk about that in just a little bit here. But basically what's happening is God is allowing these things to happen, and He's using what these locusts would be doing anyway. But He sets a limit on it, and He says that you can go only this far. You can torment, but you can't kill. And not only that, but what does He say? You're told not to harm the grass or the earth or any green plant or the tree, but only those people who do not have the seal of God. Why could, and this sounds sort of oxymoronic, doesn't it? Locusts eat green things and kill living plants. And so the locusts aren't even doing what locusts would normally do. Why were the green plants not to be touched? What do we need to live on?
Say that they're there to benefit those with the seal.
Us with the seal, we can live on it. Not only that, but the people who didn't have the seal still need to be able to live and to eat and breathe.
Oh, then later on, he's going to make his heaven on earth. He doesn't want to destroy his home.
Okay, but we'll talk about that later when we actually get to the eschaton. But they're torn. So he's saying, okay, now there's a couple of things I want to parse out here before we go further. They were allowed to torment them for 5 months. Their demand, or the demons may not kill them. And the significance of 5 months, it goes back. There's really two schools of thought with regard to 5 months, and the two schools of thought are this: 5 months is biologically the lifespan of a locust. That's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is to say it's an intermittent, ephemeral period of time, which, once again, like so many other references to time in Revelation, actually just says it's going to be sporadic throughout, but it's going to be short. 5 months in terms of the time span between the ascension and the eschaton. 5 months, I mean, it's like that. But it's 5 months that will be extreme anguish and torment for those who don't bear the seal.
So it's going to seem a lot longer than 5 months. For us.
Every moment of those 5 months will be the stings. People will seek death and they will not find it. They will long to die, but death will flee from them.
And is that 5 months God time or 5 months our time?
I don't know.
This time it could be a long time for us.
Well, right, but I mean, the point is, I'm more inclined to believe in the second. And the second thing is to say, it's not. Think of 5 months in terms of looking at it, and like as opposed to what I'm trying to think of other references to time that we've had in Revelation.
Well, the fact that the end times are starting when after Christ's crucifixion
right.
up to now.
Right.
I mean, compare 2,000 years to 5 months.
Right.
That just...
Yeah, I mean, and basically it's just to say, okay, if you were to look at it in a diagram, understand that sliver of time is insignificant in the greater thing, in the greater scheme of things. And so the torment that will come to these particular individuals, these unbelievers, it will be short-lived, but it will be so strong and so tormenting that what will be the result?
They cry out to God for help.
Yeah, they cry out to God for help. They want to, and that's the ultimate reason that this is being done. In order to bring these individuals to an understanding, and I've got a real quick note about this. This is basically done so that the individuals would be painfully brought to an awareness of their lost condition, but remained alive. And you look at those particular things and you say, well, that doesn't seem like something that a nice, neat, friendly Jesus God would do. It's right here.
But is it what a just God would do?
It's what a just God does. In order for the overall salvation of these particular individuals' souls. That's what He cares the most about. In other words, bringing these people to the understanding of repentance. And then going back to, and like we had talked about before, and I think, Jeff, you had mentioned this too. Say it again, what you had said.
That they cry out to God.
That they're crying, yeah. Because they're looking at it and saying, okay, what is, okay, look at verses 6. Look at verse 6. Are they crying out to God? The unbelievers.
No, they're crying for death.
Okay, what's the significance of that? And I want to throw a little wrinkle in here. Think about our modern day. Why die with cancer when you could just, after you find your diagnosis out, euthanize yourself? Why bring a child into this world that's going to burden you with all sorts of different financial responsibilities or infringe upon your freedom when you could just have death? They're not crying out in those particular instances for God, but they're crying out for a final judge, jury, and executioner, which says, death, not God, to take care of us. David, I'm sorry I interrupted.
No, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, how much of our culture and our popular thought says, I want to die because when I die, it's all over and it's just oblivion and my suffering is done. But it's not like there's anything on that other side. I'm just done.
Right.
Right? I think that's what you were getting at.
Yeah. Right.
So now that you say that, when is all this happening? This is happening before Christ returns.
There's no definitive time. I can't tell you. You know, it doesn't.
If these people who are non-believers?
These are unbelievers. These are unbelievers throughout the history of the time between the ascension and the eschaton. In other words,
eschaton is when Christ comes back.
Yes, the second coming.
So it could be people who are dead now who we're not sure whether they were believers or not, but we have a high suspicion that they're not because that's what they said. So when they're resurrected, there's going to be another judgment when Christ returns.
This is talking about in terms of in terms of just our living and waking moments.
Now,
It's for any unbeliever.
Yes, before we physically die.
Yes, this is the torment. This is a torment that exists before death.
Yeah, when it said that the star falls to the earth, that was the devil. He fell to the earth.
Well,
before
right.
Adam and Eve.
Well, right. You know, but you look at that, right? Exactly. And then not only that, but you look at it in terms of what we read in the book of Job. Where was Satan? What does God? God asks him the question: "Where from whence have you come?"
Yeah, he's been going back and forth from earth.
Yeah, from roaming the earth.
How long ago he opened the shaft?
The shaft's been open for a long, long time.
So what about those people who have died before us? Are they going to get a second chance?
No, they're under. I'm not. There's that. There. I'm. That's a loaded question because I know there's. It's not necessarily an appropriate question necessarily to ask with regard to this particular thing.
Yeah.
Because looking at it and saying, okay, for the person who dies, do you sin when you die?
No.
No. Could you have sinned up until the point that you did?
Sure.
Yes. Is there a possibility that an unbeliever would have been tormented in some way, shape, or form with belief, unbelief, wavering, questioning, wondering, tormenting? And this is one of the things that's being talked about here, is that the torment takes on any number of millions of different shades. You know, it could be a doubt that somebody has within their own mind within one particular day, is to say, yeah, I could believe that, but it just seems so far-fetched, or it doesn't seem like it's for me, or it's for that other person because they do good things and I don't do that. I mean, in other words, trying to define who an unbeliever is. That's not necessarily. It's not necessarily what this is trying to do, but it's basically saying what's going to be happening in the latter days or within any given point in time in history is that unbelievers are going to be plagued and tormented, and they're going to have some significant help, not just the doubts that they have in themselves, but Satan sending other people to torment them. It's going to be doubled, tripled. The pain and agony is going to be excruciating. So much so that they'll want death. So, I mean, that's why I'm saying with regard to the question that you're asking, it seems to me you're asking me a question with regard to somebody that has died
Whatever.
that rests.
Yeah, so because I guess my question is, you said this revelation is between Christ's resurrection and when Christ returns.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So then, when Christ returns, aren't we all supposed to be resurrected?
We will, yes.
So what about those unbelievers? Do they get a second chance here or not? I mean, it doesn't look like
I'm not seeing. We're not talking here about the general judgment. This isn't the second coming.
Oh, okay, that's what my question was.
No, this isn't the second coming at all. This is saying this is existing somewhere between the resurrection or the ascension and the eschaton.
And when the second coming comes. Okay.
Wherever that happens to be, and it applies to all unbelievers in one way, shape, or form.
Unbelievers who are still alive then before Christ comes.
Well, let's put it this way. If my grandfather was an unbeliever, this applies to him.
Even though he's dead.
Yes. Well, it applied to him when he was living, is the
Yes,
point.
yes. Okay.
My great-great-grandfather, who may have been, as my mother has found in our... I think this is amazing.
It doesn't help them at all.
Well, my mother's done genealogy, and this is crazy because she says you either come from a long line of Satanists or a long line of Presbyterian pastors. I'm not sure how they mixed, but...
I was going to say that like the same. Oh, no.
Yeah, right. I know exactly. But but I remember when my mom said that, it was like, I was right before I went to seminary, and I was like, that's interesting. I'm not sure I quite know how to take that before going into seminary.
Is your mother's parent, father, grandfather, a Presbyterian?
They're all printed. Yeah, they were Presbyterian ministers, but 4 generations ago, 5, whatever it was, whatever puts them back like to the beginning of like the 1820s or the 1840s. I have a member. She was a great aunt or something like that, who was the charter president of the United Satanists of America.
United Satans?
Satanists of America.
Oh my gosh,
yeah.
That is interesting.
USA.
I know, right? So, just so you know, I'm just being honest with you where I come from.
We knew.
All right. So, yeah. So, but what we're saying is that this applies, it's very difficult because...
Pull no punches.
Yeah, right. So we look at that and we're like, okay, I would imagine that my ancestor who formed the United Satanists of America probably fit into this.
Yeah.
Probably. I don't know. I never met her. Kind of sounds like it, though. And, when you're looking at this and saying, okay, she's never written in any of her family histories about how she was tormented about these particular things. There was never... But the point is to say is that these things apply at any particular given time, at any particular given place, to any particular person who is an unbeliever that exists between the ascension and the eschaton.
Okay.
There's a lot that's there. But does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. You answered my question.
Okay. Other questions? All right. And go ahead, Sue.
When it says star fallen from heaven to earth, and that's the devil,
Sure. Mm-hmm.
that was when Christ ascended? Is that when that occurred?
No. It's just saying what we're saying. What it's saying here is, remember, when we're talking in terms of timing in the book of Revelation, what God is doing through John is that we're putting together. The chronology goes out the window, and that's very difficult for us to grasp because I like to know that 2 o'clock follows 1, and 3 o'clock follows 2. And A and B follows A, and C follows B, etc., so on. But in terms of the timing, you can't look at it and say, okay, chronologically.
Well, I didn't really put it with the 5th angel.
Okay.
I just put it when Christ ascended. I mean, I'm not really putting it
I
chronologically.
would be more inclined, and just from different readings of what Revelation says, I would be more inclined to remember like what we talked about. Chapter 9 in Revelation is what 16 is talking about, is what 21 is talking about. These are events that are coming near the very end. So in other words, what we can gather from reading in the book of Job is, okay, Satan travels to and from all sorts of different places in whatever manner he chooses to do so. He goes to and fro upon the earth, as we saw in the book of Job, and then this is one of the other things where you start to look at it and say, what's happening here is Jesus, and I can't remember where it is actually, but Jesus, somebody help me if you know this, Jesus says that he sees Satan falling from heaven as a star would fall. There's a time where Jesus makes that reference.
It's after he sends out the 72.
Okay, so it would have been
Or
Luke
12,
in
I
Luke's
can't
gospel
remember. It's
somewhere.
one of those.
Okay, so so Jesus says that, and you look at it and you say, okay, in terms of chronology, when was Satan thrown from heaven? When did he get thrown from heaven? Thrown out and down out of heaven?
Sometime before Adam and Eve.
In Genesis. In the book of Genesis. That's when it had happened. Okay, so he falls. Lucifer, actually, do you know what the word Lucifer means? Hi, Kate. Lucifer means a light bearer. Did you know that's what we call our acolytes? Lucifers? It's actually a good word. I mean, it's only had negative connotations because of the Prince of Darkness.
So his name is Lightbearer, but he's the Prince of Darkness. And how come? How did that happen?
It's an amazing irony, isn't it?
Yeah.
He was supposed to be and was given to be an angel of light.
Oh, I see.
He is in reality was an angel of darkness, and how that fits perfectly into every bit of theology that exists within the Holy Scriptures. He is a messenger that was given to bring messages of God to individuals, but he's only brought darkness and destruction and those sorts of things. He's cast down from heaven as a star, as light from heaven. And so, and maybe I'm not understanding the question, but I guess what I'm hearing is you're asking a question more in terms of the chronology of when the star came, and if is that the question you're asking?
Well, yeah, I was wondering if it says by his death and resurrection, Jesus has bound or cast out Satan.
Yep.
So and that's the beginning of 20 as well, like you were saying. But so is that this right here? I saw a star falling from heaven. Is that not? That's not necessarily when it happened or whatever, but.
You're onto something, and you're looking at it. And okay, what we're seeing here is, if we were to look at it in terms of a cross section of time, I mean, we're covering the whole of creation. I mean, and I think that you understand that. But in terms of what it says, then when you get to Revelation 21, is it 21 that you had seen that?
It says 20.
In 20, okay, that probably is right. So you look at it and you see, okay, so then Jesus in the end, by virtue of his crucifixion, and here's the thing, the cosmic battles that we're going to start seeing in chapter 16, where did those particular things happen? Where was the battle of Gog and Magog? Where was the battle against God, against the dragon? Revelation 20 addresses that particular point. Who did it? Jesus addressed it. He's the one that cast Satan down. Where did he do that most specifically in terms of a location that we can actually put our finger on?
Heaven?
But most specifically, think of Good Friday.
Oh, okay.
The battle of Gog, Magog, these cosmic battles existed on Calvary in terms of that's where it found its culmination. But not only that, and this is where we start to work in all of the eternal principles and understandings of just how God works. Yes, the victory is won most specifically in Jesus, but it goes forward and it goes backward. It continues on to the beginning of time, and it will go on until the end of time. So then, when we get into Revelation, and we start, like we were seeing already in chapter 9, where we look at it and you say, well, chapter 9 starts with Satan coming to earth. Don't think about it necessarily in terms of, okay, a beginning necessarily of a story.
Well, no, it says, let's see, it says it had fallen, right? A
Yes.
star fallen, so I'm not saying that it necessarily has to go with, it did happen at
Okay.
6 or whatever.
Okay, good. Right.
But I'm saying when he had fallen, was that at the cross? In other words, like with Job, he was in the presence of God.
Right.
But now
Yep. Yeah.
he's fallen at the cross, though, right?
There's a couple of different distinctions.
Okay.
And those are very good questions. Those are very, very good questions. Jeff,
I've got a note in my Bible that offers a different viewpoint. It said it's most likely a good angel, this being that's fallen, because it says the key to the shaft of the abyss is normally held by Christ, and it may have been given to another being from heaven.
Well, see, and where did Satan begin?
Okay. Yeah, heaven.
Okay, and then you're looking at it and saying, and I'm not seeing anything like that in the Greek.
Okay.
And looking at it and saying, the word angel or messenger is the Greek word angelos. That's not in here anywhere. But you look at it and you say, kai pneumatos angelos, the fifth angel.
Okay.
So in other words, in the Greek you get an understanding in saying, there's a distinction between the angel and the one fallen from heaven. He was an angel. But in the book of Revelation, what's absolutely amazing, angelos, angels, is only affixed to who? Good angels.
Okay.
Angels are never, the demons, the etc., so on, are never referred to as angels. They're not referred to as that. They're called destroyers. They're called locusts. They're called, different things like we'll see later on in Revelation chapter chapter 9. But Sue, going back to what you had mentioned too, there's a couple of different distinctions that are going on. You bring up a good point with regard to Job. Job was one who had the seal, right? So he's under the protection of God. Okay, he has these things happening. Okay, on the totally different side of things. Okay, when Satan is tormenting Job, who's there attending to him? God is, and Job knows this. It's not that he suffers less. How is it for an unbeliever?
They have no comfort.
Where's their comfort? Where's their certainty? Where's their hope?
I think of my mom. She's gone through some health issues with cancer and whatnot, and she says older people in her age, she just gets so sick and tired of hearing people complain about all their aches and their pains and their grievances, where she said, I just can't do that because I know there's hope, because she has faith.
Yep. And so we're going back to, and then, remind me of the question. So you asked a couple of different questions, but in terms of the suffering that's happening in Revelation 9 and what happens with Job, they're two totally different people. A believer has the seal, therefore the comfort and the hope that comes even in the midst of these things. These things aren't coming in Revelation 9 for us. But as we get into the latter parts of Revelation, we're going to see that these particular things do affect us in one way, shape, or form.
When these things are happening to us, they just don't torment.
Well, you may have a friend, a loved one, a neighbor, a relative who is an unbeliever.
That's the torment.
For not necessarily even for us or for them.
For us, because there's nothing we can do. It's up to the Holy Spirit.
But
We can bring the gospel and 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 bring the gospel. And if they're going to stand and dig their heels in and say, that's fine for you, you need a crutch, that's perfect, then you use that crutch. I don't happen to need it. So it's tormenting, I think, don't you? Don't you all? Well, maybe none of you have that in your family, but for those of us who do, it's very disheartening.
But Sue, I want to make sure I'm answering the other one. There are other questions. I know there's questions I'm leaving unanswered. What were some of the other ones that you had?
Well, it was just, I guess, where it says Satan is fallen, I assume that meant at the cross. He's kicked out of heaven. He no longer is able to approach God or be in His presence, or
he's judged, absolutely. Not only that, not only is he cast out, but he's judged in the sense of saying he knows where he's going. Part of his torment is to walk on the earthly plane, not knowing the day or the hour when he's going to be ultimately cast down into hell. It's the perpetual wait till your father gets home for him.
okay, so he's free before that. Well, it says here, Christ bound Satan at his death. So then that
I think, okay, so
judged.
in that particular instance, to say that Satan is free is wrong.
Well,
Satan's bound to work within the parameters of what God will allow him to be able to do.
But God allows
what
them
was
to
the
roam around.
difference between, other than his knowing where he's going and his judgment and all that, I guess, prior to Christ's death?
Okay, say that again.
What was the difference then prior to Christ's death and resurrection?
In terms of his ability,
Free. I know he's not free. But
right?
Status of the devil.
Yeah,
The status of the devil.
Abilities or
Well,
none of his abilities have changed.
Okay, right. Okay, but here's
Happened there.
yes and no. When was judgment enacted?
In the Garden of Eden.
Exactly. When God said what? Genesis 3:15. When God spoke it, it's as good as done.
Is that the heel and the head reference?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm sending a seed. There will be enmity between your seed and hers.
Right.
He will crush your head, you will bruise his heel. That's when victory was won. It was visual and actually it was spoken and then completed on the cross. I mean, and you start to look at it in terms of swaths of time, in terms of periods of time as we look at it in terms of human beings. That's thousands of years. From the promise to the actual Mount Calvary is 1,000 years. So, you look at it and you say, and what Satan is doing, and we remember a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about it in Jesus' temptation. What was Satan trying to do? Where did Satan want to keep Jesus from?
The cross.
From the cross.
Yeah.
Isn't there a time when Satan could approach God as he did in Job? And then isn't there now a time when he no longer can do that? Or has that time not come? Is everything the same? Is the relationship that Satan had with God, where he can approach him and everything, in the book of Job,
Okay.
it's described there, does that still exist today?
I don't know the answer to that question. In terms of great counsels of the spiritual beings, I don't know.
Well, yeah. Could Satan go to God and do the same thing?
The answer, let's put it this way. What would be, if hypothetically those councils were to convene, what would be the difference of what God says today than what He's always said?
Well, I'm trying to get to the heart of all these.
Sure.
What are there differences? Did something different happen at the resurrection? Saying no, so that means that the way God, I guess, we had the impression that Satan is somewhat like a step more separated from God since the resurrection or since the crucifixion.
Well, there's a chart in your Bible that you don't have today, I guess, but it says Christ bound Satan, that shows at the cross the symbolic reign, then the symbolic 1,000-year reign of Christ begins. So I wondered, they're putting that right at the cross, so I was wondering, well, what's the difference before and then after?
Okay.
Must be when he fell.
Yeah, I mean, well, no, I mean, the only difference that I can really see, because it's degrees of difference. You know what I mean? It's basically to say, the major point is the devil is defeated. From the time God speaks the words in the Garden of Eden, he's done. And Luther describes him, and I love this. He describes him not only as a chained dog because of God's judgment for him, but he's not even more of a chained dog. In other words, he can't be more bound than what he is already by virtue of what God has done in terms of saying what Christ was going to do, enacting what Christ was going to do, making sure in the meantime that everything that happened between the prophecy, the first one, and the 293 other messianic prophecies, and then the birth, because at the birth of Jesus, Satan all of a sudden, that's the one. And then through 33 years of Jesus' life, Satan now has a focus. He can actually torment and go after this particular one, Jesus. So, and you see it, in terms of the Gospels, in terms of what Satan does. Okay, and he torments him and torments him and torments him and torments him and torments him, and he uses the only tool that Satan has left, and that's lies. Okay, in the temptation, it was, you don't have to go to the cross; you can have glory now. It was, fall down and worship me, and I'll give you all the kingdoms of this world. And to which Jesus just scoffs. I mean, he's from beyond time, will exist beyond time, knows his kingdoms exist beyond the parameters of time and space. And it knows that he's coming to bring those things for us. So in terms of, asking, or maybe making the statement that Satan's more bound, well, let me put it this way. If you were... I'm trying to think about it this way. If I told, Sue, I'll just use you. Sue, if you told me, get out of here, out of this room, go out into the cold, that's bad enough. Don't ever come back. You say it once. So what if you shouted at me again from inside? I'm already outside, shivering, cold, banished, not able to ever come back, thrown out, separated already. So in other words, I think maybe what you're saying is that the more that God, shouts it out the window, or shows us what it looks like, whether it's, through the fulfillment of those messianic prophecies, through the fulfillment of Christ's death and resurrection on the cross, through the fulfillment of Christ continuing to come to us through the means of grace. Satan, being bound by God, that's definitive. There are no degrees of being bound by God.
Well, I might be saying the same thing. I just don't understand why the chart says Christ bound Satan at the cross. But I think I know what you're saying.
Yeah, he did. Absolutely he did. And in terms of...
It implies there's a difference before and after, and I'm wondering what that could be.
But here's the thing. What I was just talking about is in terms of the objective time frame. In terms of what we see, now we've got an actual place in time. We can put our finger on it and say, I know definitively when God fulfilled his prophecy in Genesis 3:15 on the cross, on Calvary, right about the year 33, 31 AD. I know that. Boom.
For example, during the time of Jesus, in a small geographical area, how many demon possessions were there? But yet now there isn't any demon possession. Isn't that kind of very...
Well, we don't call them demon possessions. We call it mental illness now.
Also, they do still exist?
No, they still do exist. Yeah.
We don't know that there is a demon possession. We just don't believe there is.
Right.
Because we give it a medical cause.
Yeah.
Or something, or unknown.
Right. If somebody's schizophrenic in Haiti, they say you're possessed by a demon. If somebody's schizophrenic in the United States, they give you medicine.
So you're saying that sickness is just demon possession?
How long were Adam and Eve supposed to live? Did Adam's knees ever hurt? Did his shoulders ever, did he ever have a bum shoulder?
So my bad back is demon possession?
Your bad back is showing that we are the parents of our first parents, are the children of our first parents, Adam and Eve. That's what it shows. We've lost the image of God. Who's the only man that's ever existed that had the image of God?
Christ.
Well, sorry, yes. And Adam.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone born after Adam bore the image of who? Adam.
Yeah.
I don't know. It sounds like you're saying that if somebody has any illness, then that's what we don't look at it, but it's demon possession. But then you sound like, no, it's just a product of what happened there. Clearly Jesus drove out demons as preached and said to them who they were. That's a different thing than somebody that's schizophrenic today.
Right. I had this discussion with the Thursday morning Bible study, and do you remember having this one? And the reason it's so hard to understand is because when we think of demon possession, we think of Hollywood's understanding of demon possession. Oh my goodness, it must look like The Exorcist.
The Bible depicted the exorcist.
Well, but looking at it and saying, you know, the different demons were possessing different people and making them do particular different things. You know, and you look at it and you say, you know, and it's a conversation I can't do since I have 3 minutes to get into church. But it's, you know, it's an important discussion to be able to have.